let's talk about standard form. Standard form relates to scientific notation, but we're going to talk about scientific notation later, so don't worry about that for now. We're just going to look at standard form with this example. So here we have 10 to the 4th power, and that's equal to 10,000 if we evaluate it, right? If we plug into our calculator 10 to the 4th power, we get 10,000, or we can expand out 10 to the 4th power, you get 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, and that would still give you 10,000. All right, but remember, if you multiply 1 times 10 to the 4th, that's the same as 10 to the 4th. 1 times a number is going to give you that same number. So I'm just writing this 1 times 10 to the 4th now. It's the same thing. It still equals 10,000. It's just a different way of writing it. And it turns out this way, 1 times 10 to the 4th is actually scientific notation, which again we'll get into later. But what we're doing with standard form is just expanding or evaluating our scientific notation. So I'm multiplying out my 1 times 10 to the 4th power. All right, and that's like multiplying 1 times 10,000. Just keep that in mind. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my 1, and I remember my 1 is really 1.00000, and all the zeros go out into infinity after that decimal. But we don't need to write those zeros usually because it's repetitive. That's why we just write the 1 by itself. But in this case, I want you to think of it as 1.0000 going out forever. And what we're doing when we have times 10 to the 4th is we're moving that decimal over to the right 4 times, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So after that 10,000th spot, right? Because I had 1.0, that's the 10th spot, then my 100th spot, my 1,000th spot, my 10,000th spot. Right after that is where my new decimal is. And that's because I'm multiplying by 10 4 times, right? That's why I'm moving it over. It's like multiplying 10,000 times 1. So when I move my decimal there, it's because of that 4 in my exponent for that 10, all right? And I moved it over 4 times. I'm going to get 10,000, all right? So this is another way of seeing it. All I'm doing is I'm moving my decimal to the right side because I have a positive 4 as my exponent for my base of 10. And that's your standard form, all right? It's just expanding out the scientific notation by multiplying it out. And if you plugged in your calculator 1 times 10 to the 4th, we already know that's 10,000, so it matches up. All right, let's try this with another example. We have 6.54 times 10 to the 3rd power. So again, I'm going to take my 6.54. But remember, it's 6.54, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and those zeros go out into infinity. But again, those zeros are repetitive, so we only write it as 6.54 in our scientific notation. That's the first thing I gave you, 6.54 times 10 to the 3rd. Talk about that later. But looking at this now, we have 10 to the 3rd power, so I'm going to move that decimal over 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. So now it's after my 1,000th spot. I've moved my decimal over because each time I'm multiplying by 10. It's like multiplying by 1,000. That's 10 to the 3rd power, 1,000. And I get those 3 spots because of that 3 in my exponent of my base of 10. And I get 6,540. That's my standard form for this one. Just multiplying it out. It's like multiplying 6.54 times 1,000. I'm just moving over my decimal as many tens as I have. Okay, and that's what standard form is. It's just expanding or evaluating your scientific notation.